One of the things that the right is saying now is that we don't need any border legislation because the president already has the power to shut the border down. Now, this, of course, is absurd. And I'm glad that the president doesn't have the unilateral authority to shut the border down. In some instances, the president needs to rely on the pretense of let's say, a pandemic that most of his party doesn't believe really existed in the first place, and then extend how long that pandemic lasted for immigrants as opposed to the rest of us. But here is Dan Crenshaw, and then we'll play Chip Roy, both sort of responding to this idea that the president has a unilateral authority to do this. And I will say that, like, again, I'm glad the president doesn't have the unilateral authority to do this because recent history, and by that I mean almost all of our history, shows that you cannot rely on who you want to be the president and that they might be anything but anti-immigrant. And then we'll talk about Biden's position on this. But here's Dan Crenshaw.
I understand some Republicans are saying we don't need any changes to law. Then why did we write HR 2? Why did we do that? Why didn't Trump just shut down the border? If you just think we don't need any changes to law, he couldn't. He had to make a deal with Mexico, and he did a great job doing that. But he had to rely on literally international agreements to get it under control. We do need changes to law. You got to change those loopholes in asylum. You got to raise the bar for asylum. You've got to make it very clear that there's no paroling. You need to institute remain in Mexico as an authority in law. These are really simple fixes that need to be done. And, that emergency authority that everybody interpreted, I think, as entries, you need to clean that up. You need to make that clear that that's not entries, it's encounters. Probably I would decrease that number vastly, too. I think 5,000 is way beyond an emergency per day. I think it should be closer to 1,000. But, reasonable people can actually make a good bill here. That's what the House should be doing.
Do you have high hopes for that?
No.
Why not?
But I'm still going to try.
Okay, so Dan Crenshaw espousing what the reactionaries want in terms of the border, and they basically got it. They basically got it in this bill. Here's Chip Roy saying the same thing, that we need to have statutory authority to diminish and become far more inhospitable to asylum seekers and immigrants broadly. Here is Chip Roy.
No, we're not going to just pass the buck and say that, any president could walk in and secure the border. I saw former President Trump make that allegation earlier today on one of his social media posts. All the president has to do is declare the border is closed and it's closed. Well, with all due respect, that didn't happen in 2017, 18, 19, and 20. There were millions of people who came into the United States during those 4 years. No, we're not.
Okay. So the idea that this authority already lies with the president is a lie. But Joe Biden and the Democrats, at least led by Biden. I don't think the Democrats would have done this were it not for Biden pushing it. And we'll hear him say that in a moment. Basically want to provide at least part of that authority to the president, in addition to setting up a system which greatly makes it even harder for asylum seekers and immigrants in this country. Again, we went through this yesterday. You can be in this country for over a decade legally with legal documents and working papers, still not have the opportunity for citizenship. This is just about, ultimately, preventing non-white people from coming in. First of all, the majority of undocumented people in this country have overstayed their visas. They came in, they had documents, they overstayed. The majority of people coming in through the border now are apparently Chinese. I'm talking the southern border. On one hand, we talk about how oppressive the Chi-Coms are On the other hand, we're like, well, but we don't care about any of the people there. Who are they oppressive to?
Yeah.
Who are they oppressive to?
Exactly. I mean, but there's a few things. Like, those two clips would have made so much more sense, especially the Chip Roy one, if this was literally Trump in office proposing this bill. Like, the way that they're talking about, we need this executive, like, or the executive authority here. It's like unitary executive theory, but for the border, that would allow for like the federal, for the White House, essentially, for the presidency to have this emergency authority, and you can activate it on a discretionary basis and say like, no, we're going to override international law on asylum and then also domestic law on asylum because I've decided to. And so like Biden proposes this, is in favor of this. What happens when the Republican gets in office? They don't care about that because, I don't know, Biden ideologically doesn't care, but also wanted to make this point for 12 Morning Joe viewers that the Republicans are unreasonable and can't make a deal. But now this is where the center of the conversation is, to your point,
100%.
which is really scary, really, really scary. This bill was as far right as you can get in terms of like a bipartisan effort to address immigration there. And when you're saying like they don't want non-white people in this country, that is true, and that's what motivates the base of the Republican Party. But for a lot of Republican Party big money donors and supporters, and for Republican politicians with deep pockets, what they also want is to create an underclass of workers who are terrified and have this a deportation hanging over their head, so they can take lower wages, work in horrible conditions, and be silent but working and really
without any type of
without any protection.
It's interesting. Yeah, Chris Murphy was going around talking about, look at how the Republicans won't even meet us when we say we want to do what to do. It's interesting that Chris Murphy and the Senate and all these people can get together on bipartisan coups when it comes to places like Venezuela or whatever, but they can't get together on actually like dealing with the fallout of our policies like that.
I mean, let's be clear here. This initial push for border legislation was a sweetener to get the supplemental funding for Ukraine and then Israel passed. That's the way this was offered. And now the Biden administration has made it the primary focus of this legislation. They have moved the Democratic position on comprehensive immigration reform from a place where we'll give you more Border Patrol agents if you give us a path to citizenship and provide citizenship for people like the Dreamers. That was where the position was then. And now it's just, we're racing to see who can put more money into the border. Here is Joe Biden yesterday, and it is him admitting, this is what he's saying. This is what the subtext of this entire exercise is. The Republicans are right. We're being invaded. This is a crisis. I just don't have the tools to do it. And now I can't convince the Republicans to do it. Well, what is the average American to make of that?
Weak.
Well, A, weak, and B, like, who's the guy who's going to solve this massive invasion crisis? Because I've only got two choices. It's either this guy
who can't
or
do
the other
anything
guy.
about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Here he is.
For much too long, as you all know, the immigration system has been broken. And it's long past time to fix it. That's why months ago I instructed my team to begin negotiations with a bipartisan group of senators to seriously and finally fix our immigration system. For months now, that's what they've done. Working around the clock through the holidays, over the weekends. It's been an extraordinary effort by Senators Lankford, Murphy, and Sinema. The result of all this hard work is a bipartisan agreement that represents the most fair, humane reforms in our immigration system in a long time, and the toughest set of reforms to secure the border ever. Now, all indications are this bill won't even move forward to the Senate floor. Why? A simple reason: Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump thinks it's bad for him politically. Therefore, he doesn't, even though it helps the country, he's not for it. He'd rather weaponize this issue than actually solve it. So for the last 24 hours, he's done nothing, I'm told, but reach out to Republicans in the House and the Senate and threaten them and try to intimidate them to vote against this proposal. and it looks like they're caving. Frankly, they owe it to the American people to show some spine and do what they know to be right.
I can't even watch this anymore.
You're not energized by that?
Aside from me not being energized, I mean, listen to what he's saying. My opponent in this race is all powerful and has the ability to govern as non-president. And you can't even say, like, you don't want him to be president because if he's president, he's going to push this exact same bill. He wants this bill. The legislature wants the bill, but he doesn't want it to happen until he gets into office. And now the bill is not going to happen. So the American public is supposed to go like, oh, well, I'm going to punish him for being so powerful.
For playing politics.
And keep you in office, even though
Not solving the
you
problem.
won't be able to solve the problem that you are now telling us is so urgent that it has to be solved now. Well, in 11 months and 12 months, it's going to be that much more urgent. So I want the guy who's just going to come in and be able to do it, who has control of these people. Like, none of this makes sense. None of this makes sense. And I do not believe that Joe Biden, the guy's a cipher. They think they're being smart here with the politics.
Showing that,
and none of it makes sense whatsoever.
Yes.
It is. Just play this clip from Al Sharpton, just to give you a sense of what's happened to this issue. Al Sharpton is not the the voice. Well, he may be the voice of Normie Dems, but listen to the way he's framing it now. Listen to all of a sudden, this is caravan shit. This is caravan shit that we're getting now.
Option. Well, what is being done to get the public to really rise up in various states to say to their senators that they want to see the border issue resolved? I mean, you're getting migrants beating up policemen in the streets in New York. You're seeing an influx of migrants all over the country that frankly have people outraged. And couldn't there be some kind of public pressure put in the next couple of days in some of these senator states saying, why are you allowing this to continue? Because at the end of the day, senators have to deal with their voters. And at the same time, in the bill, you give money to Gaza, to civilians in Gaza and Israel. But the border, I mean, we're looking every day at the invasion of migrants, and they're playing a time game with politics on this. Couldn't that pressure put to bear in their home states?
All right, pause it. Now, look, Al Sharpton's an idiot. Okay, I'm sorry. I've always thought he's an idiot. That's irrelevant to this. Okay, the idea that people are going to rise up and pressure. What about healthcare? What about minimum wage? I mean, I'm going to come up with like a list of 100 things that are more important, particularly to Democratic voters. Except for now, Al Sharpton has completely adopted, and if he's adopted it, he's not doing it on his own. All right? I mean, I've seen Al Sharpton work. He gets the sheet and he reads from it. The idea that there is an invasion of this country by immigrants, that one scuffle in New York City is a national issue is just absurd. But this is where the Democratic strategy leads. It's just been awful. It's just such bad politics. I can't even wrap my head around the idiocy that's associated with this. Never mind, like, it's bad policy, horrible policy, but it's not going to get implemented. All it is basically just like, I can't.
Can I also give you another thing that's going to make you infuriated? This is the circular logic that's going on in the Biden administration. He wants to portray himself as the guy that can get stuff done. And Trump is the one who's standing in the way, as he doesn't get this bill done.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
And yes, and the only guy who seems to be able to have any control of the situation is Donald Trump.
Yep. I mean, sorry, Bradley, but just gone are the days. And I mean, were they ever around? I don't know. But the Democrats are convinced that the days of like them proving they can govern is the thing that moves people at the polls versus the Republican Party being like crazy
That's
or not.
Exactly. They've gone back to this whole thing of like, this is Donald Trump has just dropped out of nowhere. Like, this isn't the Republicans. Yeah. This isn't the Republican Party I know. Come on, guys, get a spine. Are you out of your mind?
They're out.
Are you out of your mind?
It's basically excise the tumor logic in terms of like the Republicans, like, oh, like once we get rid of Trump, we'll all be able to do this thing.
100%.
We'll be able to cooperate like this. But even to your guys' point about the circular logic, this is a bill that Brandon Judd, who is the head of the Border Patrol Union, was arguing with Harris Faulkner on Fox yesterday, saying how good of a bill. It's not perfect, but it's the best thing we're ever going to get. This guy Trump touts at rallies saying he's going to become his DHS secretary. For that to be happening, and it literally doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, it's completely meaningless. Like, the so-called conservative hard right surrogates that the Democrats are now touting as the reason to support this. We have the most odious people on our side. Therefore, you should look at us as acting in good faith in a bipartisan way. It doesn't matter. You're already ceding what everyone already knows is that there's no courage involved in these decisions. Please look at how much we've been able to cede to you, and therefore look at that as a show of our strength. It makes no sense.
No, it's just a show of
incoherent.
weakness.
It's completely incoherent.
I just want to repeat this because to the point of how extreme this bill is, one, it gives that emergency authority. Two, this is a tweet from the Washington Post reporter Nick Miroff who covers DHS. Worth noting that this border bill has $7.6 billion for ICE. Roughly $6 billion of that is for deportations and detention. That is more than the agency's entire annual enforcement budget. The entire annual enforcement budget for like just $6 billion, just giving it to ICE.
And I don't know what the worst part of this is. It's really hard to assess, honestly. But like, where do the Democrats go? Let's say Joe Biden wins. Let's say the Democrats keep the Senate. Maybe they take the House. Let's say they let's say they sweep. They've already put down a marker of where like that what they want for this, like what they're going to do with the border. Like what this is moved. It's unbelievable. It's like
how quickly this has moved.
It's honestly like
from the Dreamer conversation under Obama.
That's such a better conversation because now you have Dave Rubin saying, "Ooh, isn't it weird how all the military-aged males are coming across the border?"
This is like it's honestly it's like going like, "Oh, you think I'm crazy? I'll show you crazy," and just shooting yourself in the head.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just it's. I can't even.
Because what? Then they're going to turn around and say, "Hey, actually, we have a trifecta."
How do you go into a
pathway to citizenship?
How do you go into negotiation if there's one house that is not like it's
right?
You're done.
And if Trump is the guy that hates immigrants and is so un-American and so racist, how do you run against him when you've conceded everything except for the rapist and terrorist part?
Exactly.
They've conceded everything except that it's
everything
an
but
invasion.
the rhetoric. Everything but the rhetoric, basically.